Welcome to the very first ever Stories of Us. We transform the narrative of the American veteran by adding more stories of us. Through telling our stories, we heal, we connect, and we create change in all those who bear witness. I'm Lindsay Church, Executive Director of Minority Veterans of America, and today we're joined by Qwynn Galloway-Salazar, the Vice Chair of Minority Veterans of America and one of my favorite human beings in the world. She's here to be our inaugural guest on Stories of Us, and I'm going to get right to it. So, Qwynn, tell us who you are, where, who, what made you who you are today.
All right, so before I do that, I got to get those jitters out to say, wait, whoa, the inaugural, the first.
You are the inaugural.
Dang. Well, dang. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you and your team for developing this space for dope veterans like us to share our stories. Because that is what moves the needle forward, is sharing our stories so we know what has happened in the past, what's happening in the present, and how can we ensure that opportunities and spaces are continuously being developed for our veterans of the future. So with that, you asked me to share a little bit about myself.
Yes, please.
All right, let's do that. So I am Dr. Qwynn Galloway-Salazar. I am an Army veteran. I'm a spouse to a retired combat veteran. I am a mom to 6 rock star daughters, born and raised in Queens, New York. Whoop whoop, New York, for any of the New Yorkers that are tuning in. I joined the Army in 2001. My senior year in high school, I had this idea, LC, that I was going to join the Navy. Number one, I didn't know how to swim. Number two, I was 17, and my parents were like, "No, we're not even here for that. We're not going to sign you up for that." So, like any other smart 18-year-old who decides to go off to college away from home does, I met a recruiter outside of my college who's told me basically that I can see the world. I'm gonna say that again. I can see the world on the Army's dime, and it's going to be a great experience. And I bought into it like so many other veterans do. And I enlisted. In April 2001, did my basic training that summer, came back home, 9/11 happened. The entire trajectory of my life shifted. By 2003, I was called up to active duty. I did not deploy. I mobilized to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I served at the time as a 73 Charlie, which is finance. So I was one of the favorite people because I ensured everyone got paid. Not only did I ensure that people got paid, I also ensured that, and not just me, but our team ensured that benefits were all set up before our soldiers deployed. Towards the end of my tour there, I picked up a FID, so another identifier as a postal worker, and I ran the mailroom. And running the mailroom at Fort Bragg, which was one of the largest installations that was deploying troops overseas, was another pivotal moment for me. I had the opportunity to interface with so many soldiers, LC, that were getting ready to deploy and were scared out of their wits, that came in from privates all the way to officers, sharing their stories, sharing their worries, sharing the feelings of, I hope I'm going to make it home. I didn't realize at that time, being 21, what some of those worries were like for my own family, because I was doing my mission. Like my other fellow service members, we were in this mission, doing this work for the global war on terrorism. And upon my discharge from active duty, I made the decision to continue doing some of that work. I went to school, I finished my bachelor's degree in criminal justice, followed it up with a master's in professional counseling, where I dedicated my work and my efforts to supporting service members and veterans and their families.
I've known you for a long time. I had no idea that you did finance, that you worked that you ran the mailroom, I'm learning so much about you. All right, so learning more about you. You talked a little bit about your military experience. You talked a little bit about working with veterans. So my question is, let's talk a little bit more about that. And I'm curious, this is Minority Vet, so obviously we're going to talk a little bit about identity. So how did some of the identities and experiences that you held going into the military, in the military, shape some of your journey?
Yeah. So I remember when I was going into the military and my high school sweetheart and I were still together. And I will never forget him saying, Qwynn, you know, there's no nail salons and no beauty salons where you're going, right? Just like, man, whatever. That's cool. That's cool. How pivotal and how enlightening did that statement become over the last 2 decades of my existence in this space? Not only for the simple fact that that's what civilians think of us, that to some degree, that's what I thought of myself as well. But then when I took the uniform off in that moment of transitioning, I did not know who the hell I was, because my identity was so wrapped up in, one, who I was before I put the uniform on, and then adding on this level of masculinity, right? That is a part of the military culture. And then I get out of the military and I'm a civilian again. And people are looking at me like, what do we do with her? And for a while, I didn't identify. I didn't share that I was a veteran. The very first time, LC, that I went to the VA for an appointment, because you know that window of time, you get like 4 years after you discharge where you can get seen at the VA. I go up to the desk to sign in, and the question I was asked is, what's my husband's name? And there was just this feeling, and mind you, I'm this chick from Queens, New York. I was like, what you mean? I'm the veteran. And the facial expression of that person that was at the desk, I will never forget that. I will never forget that moment of what it felt like to be invisible, what it felt like to have served my country, but to come home and people don't acknowledge that I served, that the role of my male counterpart so much more outweighed what we did as minorities in uniform.
That invisibility is, it's like the dreaded question that like anybody that's not like a very stereotypical looking veteran gets is like, are you the dependent or who are you here with? And you're like, wait, but it doesn't compute in my head because we know what the actual military looks like. And we know how many people that look like us that you wore the uniform as well, but aren't represented here. And so this actually lends itself into the work that you do now. And so these are all really like very simple yet profound questions. And so who are you today? I know you do some really epic and dope work. So who are you today? Who is Qwynn, Dr. Qwynn?
So in 2006, I came home off of active duty and I landed my first job interview, my first civilian job interview, because when I went on active duty, I was a college student. Got off of active duty, I was a mom, and I needed to find a job to support my daughter. Not only was I a mom, I was a single mom. So my very first job interview that I went on was for a finance position. Sure, they were going to hire me. I did finance in the military. Sitting in that room, LC, as an interviewee with a panel of interviewers, not knowing what to do with me and who I showed up as, and on the other side, me not knowing to do with them because I was so used to the culture of the military. I remember walking away from that interview feeling like, holy smokes, I blew that one. I wasn't prepared for it, two. Dang, I should have followed and paid attention to what they were talking about in TAPS, 3. And I wish I had other women veterans that were in a space that can navigate me through this leg of the journey. And so I said, at some point, you're going to come back to this. I don't know how, and I don't know when, but you're going to come back and you're going to make an impact right there. So long story short, I did the work. I started working to support service members and veterans and their families. So I've tapped into post-traumatic stress disorder, military sexual trauma, suicide prevention, end-of-life care, workplace efforts, leadership. I've kind of dipped my toe in a lot of spaces. So that term multi-potentialite, where you're just like an octopus and you're like this, I have found myself doing those things because I remember what it was like coming home and feeling so alone. So I had the opportunity to get a PhD. And I said, hell yeah, I'm here for that. Not only am I doing this for myself, I'm doing it for the women that came before me. I'm doing it for the women that are serving currently and the women that are coming from the rear that are going to be the leaders of our future. And my dissertation was focused on post 9/11 women veterans transitions into the civilian workforce. Dope time, right? Most people who go through the doctoral dissertation journey absolutely dread it. I loved it because what I did as a qualitative researcher was I interviewed 4 enlisted women, 4 women that were officers, and I heard their stories. I listened to their stories. And a common thread, Elsie, that came from all of them were the feelings of being invisible, the feelings of going into the civilian workforce and being overshadowed by their male counterparts. And so that led me on a whole nother tangent in going into the space of oral history. I sort of became an accidental oral historian, where I began collecting the stories of women veterans who have served in our armed forces. And I started having these conversations around the nation to shed light as to what's happening. On top of that, I made a promise. One of my sheroes, and she also happened to be my mentor during my dissertation process, was Dr. Kate Hendricks Thomas. And right before Kate passed away, Kate said to me, I need you to promise that you are going to tell our stories. At the time, that was a heavy ask, but I get it now. I get the importance of it now. I get the importance not only to share the stories of just women veterans, but to share the stories of minority veterans, because in this space, we are becoming the larger population, and the demographics are looking like us, the lived experiences need to look like us, and the perspectives need to be shared by us. So I am here for all that is to come within the next few years that I feel called and led to be in this space. But I'm thankful for leaders like you. I'm thankful for other leaders that are standing in this wing saying, oh, we're here and you're going to hear us. And we are the ones that we have been waiting for.
So my normal last question is, why is it so important to tell our stories? But I'm going to ask you a different variation of this. Many minority veterans don't feel like their stories matter or that they have a story to tell. I mean, there's a lot of folks that feel erased by the narrative. And so therefore, if they don't fit it, they don't feel like their story counts. And so you are our board vice chair, which I feel you're one of my mentors, one of my leaders, and one of our leaders. And so if you could speak directly to the folks, like to our members, to the folks that might be watching this, that feel like their story doesn't matter, or that it's not worth telling, or that they don't have anything to say, what would you say to somebody sitting in front of you telling you my story doesn't matter?
Your story matters. There's someone in the community that is looking to you. There's someone in the community that feels this sense of belonging simply because you exist. And when we share our stories, as small as we may think it is, there comes this massive ripple effect. You sharing your story allows someone else in your community to feel that it is okay to share their story too. And before we know it, we have a freaking movement of storytellers that are sharing hope. I talk about hope, Elsie, all the time. Hope, for me, is hearing other people's experiences. People feel hope by hearing our stories. I was a freaking mailroom clerk. I never thought until years later how simple that role was to those that interfaced with me. You may not see how impactful your story is, but there is someone who needs to hear your story. There is someone that can start their recovery process simply by hearing your story. Give it life.
You heard it here, folks. Give it life. Thank you for that. I think we all need a reminder to be a part of the narrative when we have the opportunity, even if it's hard. And so this is our Stories of Us campaign. We are nearing Veterans Day. And so my challenge to anybody who might be watching is to get online. I want you to tell your story, use the hashtag Stories of Us. Get out there and be a part of the narrative and changing the narrative and telling your story, because like Qwynn said, your story matters. Your story is a part of the collective whole. And the stories at the margins are the ones that often are the stories that are the most powerful ones that we have to tell. And so that's my charge to you this Veterans Day, is to get out there, use the hashtag, tell your story, help us change the narrative. And stay tuned, because there will be more stories from members of the MBA community, veterans, and just really excited to kick this off with you. So thank you for taking some time and for sharing your story and doing the incredible work that you do every single day.
Thank you, my friend.